No, man, but you got to keep going. What am I going to do, quit? That's not an option. You got to keep on keeping on. Life's a garden, dig it? You make it work for you. You never give up, man. That's my philosophy.
Hey gardeners, I hope you're all having a great week out in your gardens. I'm out here in our alleyway checking out the peas growing on our alleyway trellis here. As you can see, we've got tons and tons of pods. It's time to get out here and start picking them. We also got lots and lots of flowers, so many more peas to come. Yeah, looking really awesome out here. Hope your gardens are looking great too. Now, let's get growing. All right. Welcome all you garden enthusiasts and passionate plant people to Let's Get Growing, your weekly gardening live cast right here on the Urban Gardener channel. I'm Enoch. I'm your host today, and we've got a really great show ahead for you today. So be sure to stay tuned for our great guests that we have coming up here today. Our featured guest is Joe Lample today. He's from the award-winning PBS show Growing a Greener World. Joe did an interview with me a few weeks ago, and that's what we're going to play today, is that interview today with Joe Lample. And it was a really great, fun conversation. I got to learn so much more about him and what he does with his show. Really, it was awesome of him to spend the afternoon with me and having that really great discussion. So I'm really glad to be able to present it all to you today and share that with you. So again, this is a pre-recorded interview, so I will be in the chat box with everybody else, hanging out with all of you and chatting with all of you while we're watching this great interview later on in the show. But we also have with us, we're following today, Seedy and Shady AF podcast. I was really fortunate to be contacted by them and asked to be on their podcast. And so we recorded a really great interview with me for their podcast that'll be on theirs. I think this is dropping this coming Tuesday. So I'll be on their show and they're on our show today to meet all of you today. So we'll be talking with Marcela and Shannon here in just a few minutes as well coming up. And then also I want to remind everybody we do have our Sunday edition. We're here both Saturday and Sundays at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on the Urban Gardener channel. And this week's Sunday edition, it's the third Sunday of the month. So we have our book club and we're featuring Tony O'Neill. He released his book just a few weeks back called Simplify Vegetable Gardening. This book's a really great book. It's got a lot of information, got a lot of good gardening science in this book. It's just, I think it's a really great book. Really, Tony's a really great guy. He's been on our show before. And so it's going to be really great to have him on the show with us coming up tomorrow. And I also have to remind you though, Sunday edition will be 30 minutes late this week. So again, we are going to start the show at 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow. In fact, I might jump into the chat maybe just a little bit early for anybody who shows up at the regular time, but the show will get started at 11:30. That's because we had to make sure we got the right timing just so we could have Tony on our show. Tony's from the UK, so he's joining us from the UK, but not only that, he works as a fireman as well too. So he's getting off his shift from being a firefighter and gonna make it home in time to be on the show. So we'll be starting just a little bit later in order to make it a little easier on Tony and make sure we can have him on for our book club this month. So really excited about that. And you also want to make sure that you're joining us for the book club this month too. Each and every book club week, the third Sunday of each month, we are also releasing our next month's book too. So you stay and hang on for the end of the show tomorrow, and we will let you know what next month's book is, and then you can go out and get that book and join with us and reading it for the month, and join with us in the third Sunday of June, and meet our featured author and talk about their book. So it's really fun. We had Ellen Zakos on last week, or last month, I'm sorry. We had Ellen Zakos. She had a book called Foraging for Wild Plants Without Dying, and really lots of great fun information on there too. So yeah, definitely great book club, and it's a monthly gardening book club. So if you really like gardening books, definitely join along with us for that as well too. And then again too, I want to mention as well too, we will be having next week, I want to just mention next week's guest real quick. We will have with us Vikram Baliga, the plant professor, with us, and we're going to talk all about gardening myths and all this sort of stuff. Vikram does some really great reels breaking down some of these other reels and things that we see out there in social media and in gardening, and just showing a lot of just kind of sometimes pretty ridiculous stuff. But the cool thing too is that even some things that kind of seem like it would be ridiculous but really work, he points those sort of things out as well too. He's really great. He's a professor at I'm trying to think off the top of my head right now. I should have wrote it down, but he's a professor at a university, so he's really teaching people about science of gardening and plants and all that sort of stuff. So we're really excited about having him on too. And then we'll also be following Alexis from at the Urban Gardener. She will be joining with us for our Are You Following Me segment for next week too. So definitely be sure to join with us next week on the show as well too. So really great stuff ahead for us here on the Urban Gardener. And so again, thank you all so much for joining with us here this week. And real quick, while we're at it, we should have you hit that thumbs up button and click the like button, as well as subscribe and share with all of your friends. Do all of that really great stuff. And as well too, one of the things I've been talking about the last couple of weeks and a few weeks, and I'm really emphasizing, is comments. Definitely for all of you, as we do a huge shout out to all of our replay watchers. Thank you so much for joining with us on a replay. That's the cool thing about these live streams, is that here we are live with everybody here right now, but this will go up as basically a replay video that people can watch later on their own time. And so we want to thank all of you who are watching on the replay, and as well as some of you who are watching who joined with us late and all of that too. We really want to emphasize right now going into the comment sections and leaving comments. Drop some comments into the comment section below. Let me know that you're watching. Let me know if you got any show ideas or anything like that, someone you might want to see featured on the show as well too. So definitely do that. And again, if you are here with us live on the show right now and you do have a question or comment, definitely drop that into the chat there, and I'll keep an eye out for your question or comments, and we might feature it on the show, especially if you have any questions for our guests that we have coming up here in just a few minutes as well too. So drop those in there, and we'll try to get those asked through our conversation we have with our guests coming up. So awesome. So again, really great to have you all here with me here. I hope everybody's gardens are growing along just fine right now. I think for most part, I think people are really kind of getting started most all over the country by now, at least getting something planted, something growing. I know we all have different climates and different issues and different things that we're dealing with. And some of people have been waiting a little bit longer. We have with us on one of our second Sundays of the month, we have with us Gardner Scott, Scott Wilson from the Gardner Scott channel, and he comes on to answer all of these great gardening questions. He's a master gardener, and one of the things we keep running into is he lives in Colorado, and his garden season starts a bit later, so we've been waiting and waiting for him to get out in the garden and all of that. So I'm sure on the next time he shows up with us on our next visit with Gardner Scott, he'll be talking all about the things that he gets to get growing, because he'll finally have gotten out into the garden and get growing things. And I know that's probably the case for all of us, or most of us throughout the country. And then a lot of you who live more south have been growing and gardening already for probably months now. I've been seeing people harvesting tomatoes and everything, and I'm just now getting started with planting out and getting my tomatoes out. I've been hardening them off. That's what I've been doing this last week, and getting them ready to get planted. They've been out, they've been hardened off. I've gone through that process pretty much, but I also I also basically have a day job in a sense too, so that also takes up a lot of time as well, and I have been kind of behind on getting those plants out into the garden. So I've been trying to find and get the time. So I'm definitely going to have to do that. I've got a busy weekend as well too, so I'm going to try to squeeze it in maybe right after the show, get as many of them out into some of my growing spaces as possible. But those, and so those will hopefully go all right. So I'm not really on schedule. I've been talking all season so far about trying to make sure I get my timing right on my tomatoes, and again too, weather being a little factor as well too. Usually I kind of hold off, and I wait in order to do my tomatoes until our last frost. I really, last year was a big lesson on that. We had late freezes. I wanted to make sure that, I kind of timed it out with all of that, as far as making sure that I hit our last frost date for planting out our tomatoes. I did, but we've also been dealing with some pretty hot weather already. Summer has basically showed up right in the middle of spring for us, which wasn't the case last year. Like I said, it was really cold this time of year last year, and we were really wondering, how much further after our last frost date we would have to wait in order to plant out the tomatoes. But I could have planted ours out probably last month. But you never know. I mean, you don't know that. So really, in the long run, that's what we do, is we're trying to time it out for all of that. And again, too, it just times right out with probably one of the busier parts of my whole spring. So we're going to try to squeeze getting them out. The pepper plants look really great. They're ready for getting out, and we're going to be hardening them off over this next week as well, too, and getting them planted out as we move towards the end of the month. And then again, too, also we've got a bunch of seeds that we've got to get planted out. Our cucumbers, our melons, our squash, all of these sort of things. We're getting them started so that they'll time out just right and get out into the garden here as we approach. I like to get those out here for my area in Southern Oregon right around the beginning of June, and that really seems to time out really well for them. And I get some, it's worked out really well for me. So I'm going to try to hopefully make those marks as well too this year. So far things are going good. I wish more things were planted out there and I'd gotten more things done by now, but I'm still, there's still plenty of time. I know a lot of people have been asking this question too. I've been seeing out there a lot is, am I too late to do certain things? Am I too late to get things planted? And for the most part across the board, I would say right now is just a really great time. There's still probably plenty more time to get started with a lot of other things as well too. So it's not too late for most anything. Even if if you had to start from seed. I mean, I could start my tomatoes from seed. In fact, I know this because when I go out into the garden, I see all of the little volunteers that are starting to pop up in the garden spaces of all the tomatoes right now. So they're naturally in my area starting to pop up and sprout and grow. And those tomato plants will grow and produce and all of that as well. So I could even start from seed if I had to at this point in time. So no, it's not too late at all to get started with your garden and growing. So I hope you all are getting out into your gardens. Let's see who we got here in the chat with us today. Before we get moving on here, we've got our guests with us here in just a couple of minutes. Let's see, we've got Serena joining with us right on, right at the back, right off the top there. Janet Cruising, good to see you. It's been a while, so it's great to see you there in the comments section. Awesome. And of course, we've got Jay Dixon, our wonderful and awesome, the greatest moderator on YouTube, moderating our chat for us today, joining us from Ontario, Canada. Jay, it's awesome to have you here on the show with us again. Thank you so much for taking care of the chat and dropping all of the great links and all of that too. Let's see here. Who else we got in the chat with us? I see we got Blue Wolf. Rick says hi and hi to Serena. Awesome. Blue Wolf joining with us there, saying hi, all you wonderful people. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining with us here. Rick is like, I like garden myths. Hey, some of them are pretty interesting. Some myths are actually work really well. Some are just kind of ridiculous. But it's going to be fun to hang out with Vikram and talk about garden myths and all of that. Let's see here. Connie joining with us. Awesome, Connie. Let's see here. We got Rob's Allotment Gardening. Rob joining us from the UK. Good evening, Rob. Hope everything's going great for you in your garden. Let's see here. Trying to make it through here. If I missed you, hope I didn't miss anybody there. But yeah, great to have everybody here with us today. And we're going to be right back here in just a moment and meet up with our guests. Let's Get Growing is sponsored by IV Organic.
Hi, my name is Charles Malky, biologist and plant expert with IV Organics, where we grow cool plants and author Saving the World with the Home Garden. IV Organic 3-in-1 Plant Guard has 7 natural oils that protect your plants, not just from the summer heat as well as winter cold, but also protects your plants from damaging insects and rodents. The oils in the product include castor, cinnamon, clove, garlic, peppermint, rosemary, and spearmint. These oils are natural insect and rodent repellent oils, which are encapsulated by the base powder, offering your plants months of protection at a time. 1 application per year will suffice for protection against damaging summer sunburn and winter sun scald, but if the target is pests, application as much as 2 to 3 times a year may be necessary.
This is Sarah from Sarah's Seed Shop, here with this week's trivia question. Which of the following is not a good companion plant for green beans? A. Onions. B. Brussels sprouts. C. Cucumbers. Or D. Potatoes. We'll be back with the answer later on in the show.
All right, all right. Do you know what the answer to this week's trivia question is? Drop your answers into the comments section there as well too. And here on our next break, Sarah will give us the answer to all that. And let's see who we're following this week.
Are you following me? Are you following me, dude?
All right, all right. This week we are following Shannon and Marcela from Seedy and Shady AF podcast. Now, did I get that right?
Yes.
All right, all right, all right. Well, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining with us here. And I kind of mentioned to everybody a little bit earlier that you all were really kind enough to reach out to me and ask me to be on your podcast. So I felt really awesome about that. We did a nice recording of that podcast a little while back, and it will be dropping on your podcast. Where do people find your podcast now?
You can find it everywhere, basically. It's going to be dropping on Tuesday, and we're super excited about that. You can find us at Seedy and Shady AF, a sketchy gardening podcast. You can find us on Apple Music. You can find us on Spotify. Yes, check us out.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, it was really fun. It was really awesome. I look forward to hearing that interview on your podcast. And there's also a link down below in the description for everybody to check that out as well too when it comes out this Tuesday. So looking forward to that. So awesome. Thank you so much for joining with us here on the show, and I'm going to give you each maybe a minute or so here to introduce yourself to everybody and maybe talk a little bit more. We'll talk a little bit more here in just a moment about getting this podcast going and what it's all about. How about we'll start with Marcela?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having us. My name is Marcela. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by day, and then kind of learning my way through gardening with my friend Shannon. And yeah, that's me.
Excellent. Excellent. And Shannon?
Hi, I'm Shannon. And yes, me and my wonderful friend, I was able to grab Marcela with me and bring her along this podcast journey. So she's been great. By day, I actually work in global health and international assistance, international development. And then I spend all my free time in my garden and on the podcast.
Yeah, excellent. That's really the thing too. I got a day job myself. I was just mentioning to everybody. So this time of year can be really kind of busy. I've got not only work, but I got a lot of things I got to get done in the garden if I want to be growing all the things that I'm looking to grow this season. So lots and lots of things to do for all of us with day jobs. Right on. So let's talk a little bit more. You said Shannon, brought Marcela along on this podcast journey. What was it that made you think or inspired you to start a podcast, about gardening with your friend?
Well, it's funny. I actually listen to lots of podcasts on true crime, and I also consider myself kind of a amateur stand-up comedian. And I try to be funny all the time.
Excellent. Love it.
And I just really like the idea of podcasts and the idea of doing something that I love and that I thought I knew a little bit about, but wanted to learn more. And so I was like, gardening is something I could talk about, and I could be funny about it, and just kind of, have a good time with it. And I needed to find a great co-host. And so, and I said, I need to find somebody who knows nothing about gardening, and it's going to be great, and it's going to be hilarious. And so it was perfect. So I was kind of inspired just by, I do some gardening here in Texas, and I did gardening other places, and I'm in some gardening groups, and I hear lots of questions being asked about different gardening, and then a lot of people that are just doing a lot of this really cool amateur backyard gardening. And I was like, it'd be really cool to get people who are really knowledgeable about gardening and about farming and agriculture and ecosystems and conservation, and then just normal people who do this stuff kind of as, their side job, or people who do it as a hobby, and kind of have them come together on the podcast. And so that was kind of my big inspiration.
Yeah, that's really great. That's really great. And you have some pretty great conversations on your podcast too. I really enjoy it. So it was really great too, because I hadn't heard about your podcast till you reached out to me, and now I'm a big fan. I really enjoy it. So it's great. So how has the gardening adventure been for you, Marcela? Did we get through? Did you hear that?
I didn't. I missed it. I'm so sorry. I keep going
Oh,
in and out.
oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well, hopefully you hear. But so how has this gardening adventure been so far? I mean, you hadn't had much experience. You got your friend who's got you joining along on the podcast. And so how's everything been growing so far?
I,
Oh,
It's
I
been
think we might
phenomenal.
need to.
So as a
Okay.
social worker, I really enjoy people's stories. So even though I'm still working on my relationship with gardening, feel a little bit more confident. I think what I really enjoyed about this experience has just been hearing people's stories, the different reasons why they
Yeah.
garden, the different experiences that led them there, the ones gardening has in their lives, has
Yeah.
been really enriching for me. And really inspiring in a lot of different ways, not just in the garden, but just in other aspects of my world, the things that I am curious about, the things that I want to learn about. So I've really enjoyed it. We've really talked to some phenomenal people, yourself included, who have really opened my eyes to different aspects of gardening. It's not just, like go to the nursery and pick some seeds and put them in the ground. There's really some emotional, psychological, there's a lot of different applications that I've really it's opened my eyes so much.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so, and again too, I think that was one of the great experiences of gardening and why a lot of us really just end up kind of becoming really passionate about this whole I don't know, I hate to say hobby sometimes for some people, it just kind of starts out that way, but then we, like I said, we connect so much with what we're doing, and at that point in time, that just really kind of changes our outlook on a lot of other things in life when it comes down to it. And that's one of the things why I just really, when I found gardening, I, it was just a life changer for me. And who would know that I would be hosting a show all these years later because of this passion and all of that. But it's really really kind of a fun adventure when you get started with it.
yes, definitely. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry about that. Somebody was at my door.
Oh, oh, no, no problem.
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. I know things just kind of happen when we're trying to do this, and trying to make things work out and everything. So we just kind of try to roll with the punches here the best that we
It wouldn't be
can when we
seedy and
do it.
shady.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's right. No problem. We'll just roll right along with it. So let's see here. Um, so when did you get so when did you get started gardening, Shannon? You started this whole kind of project and everything. So when did you get started? When did this kind of become a thing that you became kind of passionate about?
Well, it's really interesting because when Marcella mentioned, we have really awesome people on the show, and lots of people have these really deep connections with gardening from when they were like small kids and then with their parents and their grandparents. So I grew up in North Florida, and kind of all of Florida is a sandbar. So my yard, especially, I think was nothing but sand. So I never had any desire to do any gardening in this sandy yard that I had. So when I was a kid, I never did that. When I moved to Japan, my neighbors had tons of plants and they had tons of flowers and fruit. And so one day I just a little grocery store near my house in Japan, and I bought just some random plants, some random seedlings, and I came home and kind of learned a little bit about it. And then I just grew these seedlings. And it was okay until a typhoon came and destroyed the whole garden. So I learned a lot from that experience. And so
Right.
it kind of started there. And then when I left Japan and went to North Carolina, I learned a little bit more about gardening a bit. I started getting some things from Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, which is in that area in North Carolina. And I started learning more about climate and kind of having a garden. And I had a small garden there, indoor garden and an outdoor garden. Still had no idea what I was doing. Did that for a couple of years, left, moved to Texas, and that's where I really got involved with gardening and really started learning about just my environment, about seeds, how you pick seeds, how you make sure you have enough water and a water source, and all these things I did terribly the first two gardens I had. So I think everything really, really started here in Texas, probably over the last 4 years.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's awesome. So you're just pretty much pretty new to gardening and all of
Yeah.
that sort of thing as well too yourself. Right on. So let's see here. What do you guys got growing on at this time? You each have your own garden spaces.
Yes, I'm actually in
So
eight.
I right now have
Oh, sorry.
I guess a little bit of container gardening going on. I didn't mean to interrupt you,
Okay.
Shannon.
Yes, you did.
Again, we're Seedy and Shady over here, so we just
Right.
I have a couple of plants. One which was gifted to me by a podcast guest, and then another one that I got while I was in North Carolina. It's a snake plant, and so I'm rehabbing them. Rehabbing my snake plant because my dog ate some of it. So we're working on bringing her back to life. So that is the extent of my gardening right now.
Do you live near each other?
No, I'm actually in Texas. I'm in Texas in 8B, 9A, and she's in Virginia now.
Okay.
And more like a 7B. I think she's in,
Yeah.
Yeah, 7B, 8A. Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Right on.
And so to make up for the few things that Marcela has, I have all the things happening in my garden right now. So even though I said I wasn't going to have like 25 tomato plants, I think I'm probably topping off at about 25 or 30 tomato plants that I have going right now. Corn and a whole bunch of different, just awesome stuff. I mostly try to grow. I love to grow tomatoes. I just think that they're fascinating, and you can grow a million different kinds of tomatoes. And when I started learning about the Dwarf Tomato Project and all these different people that are out doing these really amazing things, I try to grow really rare tomatoes and a lot of heirloom tomatoes. I really am a sucker for any seed that has a good story. I'm growing like a Woods Mountain crazy bean that has a great story. The turkey craw bean has an amazing story, and a lot of these culturally important vegetables, especially being from the South and having that kind of African American tradition. And I spent a lot of time working in Africa with food insecurity, and so a lot of different types of okra and different things that come from the continent. And it just I grow all that stuff here in Texas. I'm trying to keep it alive.
That's right too, and I kind of mentioned that first. I'll say though that heirlooms are really awesome. I love that as well too. Love those stories behind heirloom varieties and everything, and variety is really the key why tomatoes really, I think, are attracted by so many gardeners, and they're not that hard to grow. They can be temperamental in different zones in temperature areas and climates. But one of the things I was mentioning earlier too, before you guys came on, was this idea that, we've got viewers from all over. So we all have in our garden start at different times. So that's got to be something really for you guys, especially as you are relating to your gardening experiences with each other, is that you have these different climates that you're growing in. So you've probably, Shannon, have started your garden well before Marcela is able to get started with the things that you're growing, right, Marcela?
Absolutely. And she also talks about quite a bit. Now, Shannon, I might explain this wrong, so definitely chime in whenever you want, because I'm still learning. But she talks about being able to prolong her growing season. And I don't know that that's necessarily an option we have here in Virginia Beach, where I am, because I think it's where it's the 4 seasons. So there does come a time when it's just too cold for us to be able to do much growing here. Whereas I know Shannon is able to prolong her growing season a little bit more.
Yeah, there are things, and it depends. I mean, if you're colder, there's definitely things that are going to stop, and their season will end at a lot of times, especially a lot of all of your summer crops and those sort of things are going to grow at things like that. But you in Virginia are going to be able to grow some of them cooler weather crops a lot easier, the lettuces, the brassicas, and those sort of things, and be able to get started, with those probably even earlier and have even better outcomes. But that's really cool though too, that you guys have that and you can bounce that off of each other about those differences that you have in your different gardenings climates.
Yes, absolutely. I get jealous of people who are in cooler climates because they can grow all the cool brassicas and the cool greens and cool stuff a lot more
Yeah.
than we can here in Texas.
Yeah, yeah. It just gets so hot so
It
fast,
doesn't stop
right?
from.
It does not stop me from trying. That is true. I just, yeah.
Me either. Yeah, that's right. That's the thing. And trying year after year to try it too as well. You know, for me, brassicas, you know, those cabbages and cauliflowers and broccoli and all of that. I've had some okay successes with those here and there, but they're always a challenge for me every year, even though I live in a place where I should grow them just really well.
Yes, I think some of the people in the chat or some people that are watching right now may be in Texas or Central Texas. And one thing that we have a really hard time growing here, well, I do, is squash. People say that squash is the easiest thing to grow. Zucchini is very easy. You throw it out. And when I was in California, it just grows amazingly. But yeah, when I'm here in Texas trying to grow squash, the squash vine borer just loves all the squash in Texas apparently because it's really super difficult to grow squash. And so when I see people in other climates that have this amazing squash bounty, I'm always a little bit jealous. Yeah, and definitely one of the comments about being in rough gardening. Yeah, it's rough gardening in Texas in the summertime. So you really have to pay attention to what you're planting and when to kind of time it out right, or else the sun in the middle of the summer will just scorch and destroy everything. So you have to be putting those really drought tolerant, heat resistant types of varieties in your garden to have the most success.
Yeah. One thing though too is Texas is really lucky. You've got a lot of people like yourself and others who are out there making some great content about growing specifically in Texas.
Yeah.
One gentleman I follow has been a guest on our show before, Scott Ed from Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. I gotta get that right. Black Gumbo Southern Gardening, and he does some great backyard gardening and has some really great videos about growing in Texas. And when we were talking, that was kind of the case, is that you have these kind of almost alternate seasons. You got to kind of stop growing in the middle of summer because it's just so difficult. So that's kind of your off season, and then the rest of the year is when you're growing, where, well, for a lot of us in other places, the winter time is when we're taking a bit of our off season and our break from what we're growing. So we have those differences between how we grow in those places.
Yes, absolutely. I actually see a question in the chat. Can I answer it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep,
there's a question in the chat about Texas. Do you use shade cloth? A lot of people actually do use shade cloth, and that is how they get around having tomatoes in the hot summer. If you have some of those varieties that don't do too well in the heat. Yes, I don't tend to use a bunch of shade cloth specifically in my garden because the way that my backyard is set up. So this was kind of one of the questions that you sent over about beginning gardeners, some advice. So one thing that I did in my garden, I think it's really important, is to watch kind of how, one, the sun moves across your garden, because you can tell if you watch it for a couple of days, what's going to be sunny and what's going to be shade, and where in the daytime that's going to happen. And so what I tend to do is try to pick varieties that are going to be more tolerant to the heat. And I put them in areas of the yard that may get more sun or may get more shade, and depending on when the day. So I don't tend to use a bunch of shade cloth, but people do use a lot of shade cloth here. Yes.
Yeah, I will. Even in my area here in Southern Oregon, we get some pretty extreme and some nice hot summertime. But it's, again, too, it's about what is your space. If your space is just wide open and it's just nothing but intense sun all day long, then you might want to start thinking about some shade cloth type of things to help protect certain plants. Even peppers.
Yes.
You know, peppers love nice hot weather, but you start getting some extreme hundreds for, a week or so on end, and those peppers are going to start burning and plants are going to start burning, and it's good to kind of give them a little bit of a break, and shade cloth will help in those for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I use, I think, about a 40% during some of my more intense hot summers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I might try to use some this summer on some peppers, like you said, but we'll see. Or maybe I'll just make them thug it out. We'll see.
Right. Sometimes you just got to do it. Hopefully yeah. Sometimes that's just the way it is, for some plants. They just got to bear through it.
Oh yeah, you definitely got to be a little rough and rugged to live in this backyard.
Right on, right on. So again, let's talk a little bit more about this podcast you got here before I let you go. Seedy and Shady AF podcast. Tell us, about what you got going on this year. Maybe some guests or some things that you're talking about.
And Marcela, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, sure. So we
Okay, I was
have
gonna say.
I really loved our first season. But I really love the variety of guests that we have this second season. We have people talking about all kinds of stuff. We have people talking about food. We have people talking about we actually just finished up an interview with a shaman. We have people that are friends of ours that are going to come on and talk, about their personal gardens. And we have a lot of, as we're editing the episodes, I'm kind of picking up on some themes. We're also talking a lot about culturally important seeds, the connection of gardening to different people's heritage and cultures. So it's a really not to toot our own horn or to be biased, but it's a really good
Toot
season.
it.
It's a very good season.
But
We have
toot.
and then you're talking about
That's right.
the culturally important seeds. We had Amira on from Sister Seeds, which was just awesome. And I was so happy that she was able to be on the show because she talks about that really important, culturally important seeds and that heritage and kind of keeping those seeds and reaching back to the community and kind of helping people to bring a lot of these lost seeds back, which was great. We had Brian, he's a botanist, and he had a really interesting episode because he's worked very closely with the corpse flower and did a lot of studies on that. We talked to him about that. He started a class at his college about cannabis, a cannabis class, which was so cool. We have someone talking about, she's from Italy. She's a food stylist. She's talking about her culture of bringing food from Italy and how she works in her business. And then we have someone talking about a poison garden.
Poison garden, huh?
Grows a poison garden. So definitely stay tuned because it's such an awesome show.
Yes,
we have very diverse and it just goes to show like how big the gardening community really is and like all these people that we've been able to connect with thanks to Shannon's idea. So
yeah.
See,
that's the thing. You get in and you start joining in with it and find out exactly what, and this is the thing I love to promote. That's why we do our show. That's why we do what we do in having the guests that we have on our program is to promote a building community through gardening, as we see at the top of the screen there, because I believe that, gardening is the common ground. I've been talking a lot about this lately as well too, where all of us with all sorts of backgrounds and all of that meet together and have this common passion and enthusiasm for growing things and all of that too. And I find that the gardening community is just a wonderful place with wonderful people doing all sorts of wonderful things, and it's great to have you two here to talk about the podcast that you do as well and helping promote more of our gardening community through the great guests that you guys have as well too. And me coming up this Tuesday. So you'll have to definitely be sure to link up with them. And we have the link down in the description below so that you can go check out our interview coming up this Tuesday and all of the other great interviews that you talk about as well too.
Yes, and we talk about raccoons on your episode, which just tune in for that, if nothing else.
Exactly, it's so great. Yes, awesome. So, definitely go check out Seedy and Shady AF podcast. Link down below in the description. And thank you so much for joining with us here today on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us. Yes,
you got it. We'll catch you later.
Have a good day.
Catch you later.
Hey, gardeners. Thanks for tuning
everyone.
in to our show today. We'll be right back at it here in just a moment. I just wanted to take a second here to highlight our regular videos and features here on the Urban Gardener channel. Our weekly garden journals, and our incredible featured visits.
The answer to this week's trivia question is A. Onions produce a chemical substance called allicin that stunts beans and other legumes early in their growing season. It does this by preventing the plants from fixing nitrogen in the soil, essentially robbing them of the nutrients they need to grow and flourish. Thanks for watching. Head over to Sarah's Seed Shop where you can find garden seeds at unbeatable prices. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Oh, let's make sure we get that back to full screen. I got to get used to doing the things when it comes to having two different people on. That's something that I've been trying to get used to here, as on some of our Sunday editions as well too. We have a gardening roundtable. We had recently my friend Christopher Bransdahl and King Starr on the show, and again, same sort of thing. I got to get used to making sure I'm clicking the right things for having three people on screen versus just the two that I usually use when we have guests on. So right on. And I did want to mention too that I did see your question there, Serena, and I apologize. We were already at the finishing up part of our question or our interview there. We have to get to moving on with that segment. So I'm not sure. I haven't. Let's see. I think Jay even put it back in there. There it is. About jumping worms, asking about jumping worms. I haven't seen any jumping worms yet here in Southern Oregon yet. I've been hearing all about them. So I'm not sure if I've seen them. In fact, I saw someone who was showing some of these hammerhead worms too. And boy, those things look nasty and invasive as well too. So I don't want to encounter any of those sort of things in my garden. So hopefully you don't have any of them in your gardens either. But yeah, let's see here. Oh yeah, Rick saying onions. I got that one wrong. I was gonna say Sarah's been doing a good job with those trivia questions lately. I try to when I'm putting them together, I try to have think of the answer to them myself before I actually work on the video part for the answer. And actually, I did get this one right, but I didn't get it right because I just for the right reasons. You know what I mean? I completely guessed. Right on. Let's see here. Let's see. Jersey Girl says, hornworms are bad enough. No, thank you. Exactly. I love our garden worms. I love the outdoor garden worms that I have in a kind of like a worm bin, compost bin for them and all that I feed food scraps to. So I have like this outdoor worm castings type of bin. Then I have also an indoor vermicomposting system I started this last year. And I just really dig growing worms and being able to harvest my own worm castings now. So I get those for basically free. All I got to do is just feed my food scraps, so I'm creating this kind of like, a circular system of, where it's just not costing me anything for these inputs into my garden. I love these worms, man, but I don't want to see any of these jumping worms, or especially those, hammerhead worms that I saw. What I was reading when I heard about those was that you could cut them up into a bunch of pieces, and each one of those pieces of the worm will grow back into a whole nother worm. And I'm like, that's a bit freaky when it comes down to it. I'm not down for any of those in my garden. So right on. So I just want to say, when it comes to questions and all that, be sure to get your questions in right and early when we get our guests rolling. That way we can make sure we can try to fit those into the conversation and all of that. I apologize for not being able to get to that and asking Marcela and Shannon about jumping worms, if they've seen any of those yet. But it was a great to meet them. And again, like I said, it was really great to be on their podcast, and they have some really great guests and some really fun conversations. They are really fun. It was really great and fun to talk with them. So I'm really excited about hearing the final podcast as it's all put together this Tuesday. So be sure again to get down in the description below and go check out their podcast there. All right, let's see here. Right on. So again, our featured guest today is a pre-recorded conversation. Joe Lampole, host of the award-winning PBS series. He's been doing this series for a long time now, many years, and I've been following along with him in this series as well too for a long time. And it's great to see that he still does it and everything as well too. But just a really great show on PBS, where not only does he talk about gardening, but as the title suggests, growing a greener world. He's just a really great ambassador of natural gardening and being able to connect gardening and our relationship to nature and all of that as well too. Joe's just really passionate as well about what he does and what he's growing, and all of that really is really makes his show really stand out. And that's why he's won the awards, and that's why PBS keeps him around year in and year out in order to keep encouraging people to grow a greener world. So I'm really excited about sharing this conversation with all of you. Like I said, it's pre-recorded, so we're going to hit play here on this interview, and then I'm going to be in the chat box, so you guys can throw some questions at me if you want in the chat there as well too. And I hope that you all really enjoy this really great conversation. Here is today's featured guest.
You never know when you might learn something, and that's what this is about for me. These are people that I admire. Please welcome my next guest.
So, all right, everybody, let's welcome to the show. Oh, and my mic's muted. Oh my, I'm so sorry, everybody. We've got some problems and issues here. Usually the video playback works really well for our, what we use is StreamYard for our production of everything here. And usually video playback works really well, but Jersey Girl says, man down. I know. Oh my gosh. Yep. We froze there. I'm trying to see what's going on with our video playback. But there seems to be an issue with it. It froze up there and it's not unfreezing. Well, I don't know what to say. I guess we might have to hold off our conversation with Joe for maybe a later date and see what's going on. I don't know. Well, I guess. Yikes. Well, I guess that's that. I mean, we're going to have to maybe hold that video off for another date. Good thing it's a pre-recorded interview with Joe there that we can play for you at another time when maybe the system will hopefully work better. I haven't never run or anything like that. Jay says, would restarting help? I can't restart everything without kind of resetting up a whole new stream and doing all of that sort of stuff. And then, so that would probably just be, at this point in time, I think what we'll just have to do is pretty much just, again, like I said, play the interview at a later date. We'll save the conversation with Joe. Really great conversation. Like I said, it's pre-recorded, so we can kind of fit that in. I've got an opening up here in another couple weeks here as well too, that we can catch up with that conversation with Joe. Really great of him to spend some time with me and recently, and we had a really great conversation talking all about how he got started in doing his television show and all of that. It just kind of happened in a way, and and he took a chance at something. I thought it was really great backstory on how he got started with growing and all of that too. So definitely we'll do that at a later time and all of that too. So definitely, let's see here. We'll have that coming up. So if you got any questions, you got anything you want to talk about, jump in the conversation right here, and we'll talk about some of the things that you want to talk about. And we're just going to hang out here for a little bit. We are just still live streaming here, so we can hang out. We can have a conversation together a little bit, finish up the show here, and then, like I said, we'll I'll get a new thumbnail put on this as well too, and we'll get Joe Lampel back on the show later on and all of that. And that's, I get in another reason that's kind of cool with this sort of pre-recorded situation with that. I mean, unfortunately, it's not playing at this moment, but it's pre-recorded, so we can play it again later. If this was a live situation, we'd have to reschedule. We'd have to do all sorts of situations when it comes down to that. And doing a live show, we've ran into that before. It's kind of the thing about doing a live stream like this. Sometimes you've just got to kind of roll with the punches a little bit, as we were talking about with the Seedy and Shady podcast. Let's see here. Connie asks, while we're waiting, I overwintered an eggplant in a smaller pot. Can I transplant to a larger pot after it flowers? Oh yeah, I'm sure that plant's going to really enjoy that. And maybe, and I have never tried overwintering an eggplant before, but if it's still growing and it's still and doing all that, you're saying it's putting out flowers, all of that, so maybe, yeah, give it some more room for the roots, get it in a larger pot, and then again too, as you start seeing the weather warm up and that sort of thing, get them back outside as well too. If I'm sorry, maybe I'm just assuming you're overwintering, saying bringing it inside, but maybe it's already outside and that sort of thing. But yeah, I've never tried overwintering an eggplant. If I could keep it going and keep it warm enough, which would be my issue, I suppose. If I had a greenhouse or a nice heated greenhouse or something like that, maybe I could do that sort of thing. But I'd imagine if it's still growing, it's probably still going to enjoy a larger pot. So I would definitely do that. See if maybe you get some more growth off of it too, and it just starts. Let's see here. Let's see here. Jay says, this is an opportunity to discuss what is growing on in my garden. Well, yes, absolutely. I'll talk a little bit about what I've got growing on. I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier in the show, though, too, that, I've got a lot of things happening, just trying to fit in time right now to make sure I get everything in the ground that I need to get into the ground. And also, making sure that we're hardening off things. Peppers are going to go outdoors real soon. Let's see here real quick. I'll jump in real quick. I'll continue to talk about what's going on in my garden here around other things. If you all want to jump into the chat with any sort of questions or anything like that, and then we can talk about that. Serena asked, any plans to have Scott Head on our channel? Well, funny you should say. We do have plans to have Scott Head on the channel here real soon. In the coming weeks, we are going to have him as a featured guest again back on the show. I love talking to Scott. Scott is also an affiliate with our sponsor, Ivy Organic. And I just recently saw Scott on a kind of a seasonal Zoom call that all of us affiliates do with Ivy Organic. We get together and I get to see folks like Gardner Scott in there, Kay Cottrell, and a few other really great people that I love seeing each and every time we get to do one of those things. And I saw Scott there and I was like, hey, we got to get you back on the show. And so we did. We scheduled him for a couple of weeks from now too. And let's see here. If everybody holds on, I think I'm going to hold it until maybe the very end here. But I'll tell you what, I do have a special announcement about a show coming up as well too. Let's see here. Question from Jersey Girl. How do you kill poison ivy plants without chemicals? Well, yeah, I don't know. And I'm not too sure. We have a lot of poison ivy like out on trails, poison oak as well, out there as well on trails. I always make sure that I'm staying and making sure I'm keeping if I'm wearing like shorts or anything like that, I'm making sure I'm keeping a good eye on that. There's nothing worse than brushing up on the poison oak and poison ivy out there on the trails and coming home with just massively itchy legs because of that. So I really, really just despise it, but I don't have any of those issues with it or have it in any of my garden spaces or growing spaces. So I've never really had to try to kill it off. I'm sure there's got to be some sort of ways of dealing with that, and maybe I'll definitely, in fact, I think that's a really good question. I try to save some good questions that I can't answer, and try to make sure that I ask Gardner Scott when I get him on the channel for our answer all your questions appearance he does on the second Sunday of the month for our show. And I'm going to ask him about that. But yeah, definitely I don't want to be using any chemicals or anything at all with my garden spaces or my growing spaces. So that would be a challenge if it was in my space too. Luckily for me, I do have some regular ivy that grows up our back fence line up there, and I always just kind of cut it back each year and let it grow, and then cut it back each year and just kind of maintain it a little bit and all of that. But that's not poison or anything. I'm not worried about it too much. In fact, it kind of looks cool for part of the year. I just don't want it overtaking everything. So, because then it can, really become a hassle. Especially our fence back there is pretty old, and to let that get on there just could really, topple over the fence, I'm sure. So we keep that cut back a little bit. Let's see here. Let's see. Darth X says, we're trying boiling water for weeds. Yeah, well, I mean, everything else too, you gotta watch out. You're doing something of those extremes like that. It's also something. Boiling water is going to kill off any other things in your soil as well too, if if that's just a direct application into your garden spaces. And I don't want to be killing off all of that other stuff, so that's why I would avoid chemicals and those sort of things myself. Let's see. Your LP says, Jersey Girl, that is the question of the day. I too wonder. I heard someone say to use extra strong vinegar. I want to look into agricultural vinegar, though that won't kill the root. Yeah, again, too, vinegar. I'm trying some actual vinegar and salt on some cracks in some cement right now. That's between my space and the neighbor's space, and it always just gets really unruly every year. And I can't remember what kind. It's like just this really, really strong, resistant weed that just comes back every year. It just gets really crazy. I sometimes try to whack it back, but it's in this really kind of odd space where, if it's hard to really maintain it. So and it's just a crack in the cement too. So it isn't much more than a walking space. So I did some vinegar and salt. I mean, those two things together, and that's going to create a real deadly solution. And I pour that into the cracks there too. So, I mean, if it's a space where you're not worried about growing anything else, you're not worried about that sort of thing, then you might try something like a vinegar or something like that as well too. Maybe in one of these stronger vinegars where you can get it in really high percentages. As LP was mentioning there, an agricultural vinegar, as a lot of gardeners will call it, and that's really strong as well too. And the thing about that too is that you're using vinegar in spaces as well. It's like using fish emulsion. You get that fish smell everywhere. You're gonna have a strong vinegar smell everywhere as well too. But again, it might work to take those things out if you don't need to grow in that space for a while. I wouldn't, if I was to do that or kill something off like that, then I wouldn't be growing in it for a while. It might be hard to as well with vinegar to get anything to grow until that's been washed out and broken down and all of that over time. Let's see here. Jay put a link in there too. Nice. 8 ways to kill poison ivy from your yard. Hopefully there's some good organic ways in there. Let's see. Yeah, like Jersey Girl says, be careful with agricultural vinegar. Yeah, and that's another thing too about it. Not only is it never going to be an intense smell, but you really should be using like almost a gas mask or something over your face or something like that. You definitely don't want to be trying to sniff it or anything when it comes to that sort of thing. That can really, really burn and cause some issues, medical issues. So you got to be very careful. Very careful, as Jersey Girl says, with agricultural vinegar or any vinegar of a very higher percentage like that. And there's lots of different ones available. Yeah, Jersey Girl says the poison ivy is crawling on my fence. Hey, yeah, we can find some solutions for that. Yeah, He's like, I too was going to try vinegar and salt. Yeah, vinegar on its own is pretty good, but you combine it with salt, then boom, that's going to be really deadly weed killer. Rick mentions 45% strength. Yeah, 45% strength vinegar. There's other percentages as well, 30, and you can get them on all different ranges in there. 45% is a very strong vinegar. And again, too, be very careful with that stuff. Very careful. Let's see. Oh, Jay was saying about the list that she put in the comments there that most methods are organic. One of them was chemical. So yeah, that means that's probably got 7 different good ideas there for ways of handling and tackling that situation there too. Yeah. But yeah, I haven't had to deal with it myself though too. So when it comes down to it, I wish I had better advice from personal experience to be able to share with you when it comes down to it. But I'll bet you that list there that Jay shared is probably got some good ideas in there to help deal with that sort of thing. And again, too, vinegar and salt, as we're mentioning as well, is one of those that I have done for other things, and or in fact, actually, I'm really kind of testing it with that crack that I'm doing right now as well to see how well it works for that. So we'll see. And when it comes down to it, there's some things that are just very, very resilient. They might die off for a while, but they'll find ways to come back. And so you never know about some things. Some things are just very hard to deal with, and hopefully you can find a solution to that. Nobody wants poison ivy around. That stuff's the worst. Anything that is an irritant, you know what I mean? It's one thing to have weeds. It's one thing to have problem issue things like even the ivy that can climb over the fence back there. It's one thing to have issues with those sort of things. That's one thing. But when something's an irritant, when something that's actually going to cause issues and be a problem like that, that can be really troubling to have those things out. It's bad enough, a lot of the like curcubits and things like that as well too, that I got to start wearing the sleeves, get those garden sleeve things, because those can be an irritant too, with all those little hairs that they have all over them getting on your skin and causing irritation on the skin, with the things that I do want to grow, so things can be bad enough in the garden, let alone. Yeah. And Rick mentions right away, yeah, the next thing I was just thinking about, stinging nettle. A lot of people love to grow stinging nettle. Stinging nettle makes some great teas and all of that sort of stuff as well too. But man, you gotta be careful with that stuff for sure. That's a major irritant. Let's see here. Let's see here. Oh, LP says, maybe I'll stay away from the strong vinegar. I'm trying to smother the poison ivy as well. Maybe it'll try regular vinegar and salt. Yeah, definitely give it a shot, and see if that works. And again, you might have to replenish the soil for a later date, somewhere down the season, next season, even probably. I would just probably wouldn't even, if I had to extract something or do something in that sort of manner, I would probably hold off for a season again, allow that microbiology to really build back up again after that, because the vinegar and salt's going to kill everything in that soil as well too. Oh, and Brett's even suggesting that don't think vinegar kills the root, only the green leafy growth. Yeah, and like I said, there's some plants, some things are very, very, persistent, that will just keep on growing. They might look like they're dead. They might look like you took them down, and the next thing you know, they're growing back. So some things can be very, very persistent. So, yeah. Right on, right on. Yes, and again, too, mentioning things that I've got growing on in the garden right now. We were talking about hardening off and trying to get the pepper plants ready to get out there to harden off. I'm also getting ready to start up some more seed blocks, doing or soil blocks, so that I can get some of my outdoor things getting started. And then we're also direct sowing seeds, a lot of things as well too. A lot of our cucumbers, squash, and those sort of things. I mean, a few of them. I try a little bit of both. I try to grow a few as backups through soil blocks and maybe even smaller like soil pots, that I have as well too. We'll do that for some backup as well, but I like to try to get as many things growing, and if I can get them growing by direct sowing the seeds into the garden. But um, there can be issues with that. That's why it's good to have backups, and why I do the backups is because even direct sowing, you can find some issues with other pests, especially those slugs and snails and things that are crawling all around that I was seeing last night as I was walking through our back garden space. I was plucking them and trying to get rid of as many of those as I possibly could, but they're out there crawling around and they love those little seedlings as they're popping up. So I try to plant out as many as I can into the garden space to hopefully get something to survive. But just in case, I also have the backups to make sure that we got plenty growing on. But I do prefer to have those plants growing directly from seeds that are sown directly into the garden versus having a start, especially with those cucumbers and squash and those cucurbits and pumpkins and things like that, because they just don't like transplanting very much. And they'll grow, it just kind of stunts them off a little bit. It might take a little while. Sometimes they'll grow just fine. It's just that disturbance of the roots isn't the best for them. So we always find, and I've always found, I get better, stronger plants from the ones that were direct sown versus the starts that I put in the ground. But it's good to make sure we got extras just in case, though. Let's see here. Rick says, I wish snails would eat the weeds, right? They just seem to pass right by the weeds, don't they? Not any, the weeds just can thrive and grow all that they want. And again, too, remember, weeds are just plants that are out of place. So they're just things that we don't want there. I've got right now weeds that are, as I mentioned, actually, towards the beginning of the show, too, we've got a bunch of tomatoes. Volunteer tomatoes from tomatoes that fell off plants last year, and those seeds are now this year starting to pop up and grow. And when you see them just come up by the hundreds everywhere because of all the seeds that made it into the soil, got washed around, I get a bunch of them everywhere. And for my Prax cherry tomato plants, I like to keep a few of those because, again, I like those volunteers when they grow and they come up themselves and they grow themselves with the season when they know to grow. We're just, they're going right along with their natural cycle. I get some good, strong plants, get some really tasty fruits. And so I like to keep those volunteers, but I don't need the hundreds of them. So I've got to pull out tons of tomato little plant starts, which are basically weeds. They're just plants that are out of place, and we got to pull them and get them out. Same thing with some peppers as well, too, and all of that. Right on. Adam in the conversation. Good to see you, Adam. I only had one summer squash out of 6 last year due to pill bugs eating them as they sprouted. I'm doing insurance as well this year. Exactly. Yeah. There's all sorts of things that can go on and that can happen. And it's always good to have backups and to do that as well, too. In fact, I might even try a few varieties that I've got of my tomatoes that I've got seeds for. I might even try and see what I can do as far as getting some started now and see what kind of production I get starting them in what I would consider late, because I try to get such a head start. But they're popping up and they're coming up out of the ground right now. So that's, I know I'm not late when it comes down to it. So it'd be interesting to kind of get some of those other varieties, do some backups and see how they grow through the season, and find out, how well we can get some production out of them. It'd be a fun little test to do. But I think they would do well. I think we get some great tomatoes down later in the season from them. And, again, as I tell people, it's not too late yet. Rick says, yes, today was the same. Tomato plants here and there. Yeah. Popping up. Serena was asking again about the vinegar salt combo. Yeah. Again, it's something that they say, something I haven't really tried before. I usually just kind of, as I'm weeding or doing things, I take care of what I can, and I get out there and use the hands most of the time when it comes to all of that. But I thought I would experiment this year and give it a shot, utilizing the vinegar and the salt in some cracks, on the walkway, so to see if that I can't kill some weeds that are just really persistent in those cracks, or at least hold them back, or see how well it would work in those spaces. So I'm experimenting with that. So I think, it's something to try. It's something I read about every year. A lot of people talk about it as a good, natural, more organic way to, as a weed killer, versus utilizing chemicals. And we just don't want chemicals in our garden spaces. But again, too, as I mentioned, if you are using, again, you were mentioning driveways. I'm talking about a walkway. These are cemented spaces. So not too worried necessarily about kind of killing off or what's going on with the soil underneath in that sort of sense when I'm talking about a cement area. So I'll use that without a problem in those spaces. But I would worry, and I would probably really refrain from using any sort of vinegar or vinegar and salt combination in any sort of space that I want to grow a garden or any other plants in. I would consider it just as bad as not just as bad as a chemical, but as far as the soil is concerned, pretty much. But chemicals are probably even worse for us as people, Let's see here. Jersey Girl says volunteers are always hardy. Yes, and again too, it comes down to the fact that they're popping up and they're feeling, those seeds are feeling the season. They know when it's about time to come up, what's best for them, and especially what I would consider, say, my Prax cherry tomatoes that I grow from volunteers each and every year. So now as it's producing, and I've been doing this from volunteers for 6-7 years now, in this space. So each of those fruits are now growing, and they're pretty much what you would consider kind of a land race seed that they've adapted now to the seasons here. Those seeds have grown enough generations over time in this climate, in this place right here, and even in the microclimate that it's been growing in there, that those seeds now each year are really adapted to growing specifically in this microclimate that I have them growing in. So they're kind of, so that's kind of what landrace seeds are those sort of seeds and heirlooms, open pollinated seeds that are grown in specific climate specific microclimates for several generations, to have now a seed that is now its genetics are for that area too. So that really creates some really great production at that point. And so I definitely can follow along seasonally by what is the best timing for plants. And what too, I mean, here we are right at the average last frost date of our area here in my climate here in Southern Oregon, and the volunteer tomatoes are popping up. So it's it kind of tells you right about when this is that time of year where tomatoes are really great for getting out into the garden space. Yeah. Let's see. Serena's asking too. Our city has weeds and trees growing out of some of the storm drains on our streets. What is the best way to control this organically? Yeah, again, too, coming back to the vinegar and salt solution, maybe so with that in those sort of situations. It's draining into, it's just salt, it's just vinegar, so it's an these are organic, these are things that are, in the long run through the wash is going to be okay. It's not a chemical and going to be bad as far as runoff and all that sort of thing. So I'd imagine that in those sort of situations, similar to walkways, walk paths, like I'm doing with my experiment this year, or driveways, as you mentioned just a little bit ago, those sort of places. Same with probably the, street and other cemented areas where they're just popping up out of cracks in places. I'd imagine that would work really well. Jay says, they need to clean the storm drains. Yeah. There's a lot of things. Let's see here. Right on. Yes. All right. Let's see here. What else we got going? Anybody got anything else growing on in the garden? Anything you want to ask about? Any sort of questions? I'll give just about a minute or two here, and then I'm going to get moving on today. Again, I just really, truly apologize to everybody about our technical issue. I've already kind of checked back here. It's something going on, and again, too, probably is going to require me to restart everything up and all of that to maybe see if it fixes it. So I'll work on and check on all of that after the show, and I'll reschedule our Joe Lample feature conversation for a later week, and then we'll do that because again, too, really great conversation. Joe's someone I've really enjoyed his show for years, and I really hope that you guys really get a chance to enjoy the conversation that we have with him as well too. And like, that's awesome. Rick says, and again too, Rick, thank you so much too, joining us all the way over from Australia, and Rob from UK, and all of you, Jay from Canada, and everybody from everywhere else too. It's really great to be able to at least be able to hang out and have a conversation with all of you. And Rick says that's okay, it happens. It does happen. We do have some situations here and there. It's kind of all a part of the whole I really got an itch. But it really is a whole part of the live stream kind of situation in the show. I'm just kind of glad that we didn't have some sort of technical difficulty with a live guest. Those are always kind of the worst, because then we got to really reschedule those things, and it kind of just is a real bummer when they're taking their time to be with us too as well. So we don't have Joe here with us, and we can always replay it. Let's see here. All right. So also too, I just wanted to mention, I mean, I'm telling you, my nose is itching right now. But I was mentioning everybody here, and as I guess we'll just call this the end of the show here in just a couple of minutes here. And But I did mention just a little bit ago, though, that if everybody hung out for a little bit, and for all of you hung out, I would mention one of our upcoming guests that I just booked this last week. I'm telling you, this is a person I mentioned, and I have mentioned before. I mentioned earlier on in the year as we were getting started with the season, but we do have a date booked, and I want to get started talking about this ahead of time too. We'll definitely be talking about it next week on the show. Let's see here. I want to double check and make sure I got the date right. But yes, this June 8th, which is going to be 3 weeks from now, we will have joining with us live on the show. We're going to have joining with us, and Rick might know this person really well as well too, being from Australia. We're going to have live on the show. And this is great because live, I'm telling you, having a big guest live on the show, most of our big guests like Joe or James, these guys, we mostly have to do these pre-recorded interviews, but live on the show, we're going to, teasing it out. We're going to have with us Mark Valencia from Self-Sufficient Me. And I'm telling you, I am fanning out right now. I've been so excited about this since we finally set a date. We finally got it figured out completely. And as Rick is mentioning there, 5:30 a.m. for him. It's the time is going to be one of those factors as well too. We will be having the show an hour late that day. We will talk more about that as we get moving here too. Again, with like Tony on our show tomorrow, we're going to be half an hour late on that show as well. Is because, again, he's from the UK. He's got some scheduling things. We want to make sure we can get him on the show at that time. So we are going to do that about half an hour later. I'm going to try to jump in. I know there'll probably be people who'll be checking out or being around. I'm going to try to jump into the chat and, say hi to everybody, at our regular time. But we'll be getting the show started about 11:30 tomorrow, and then we'll have Tony on for his book. But same situation with Mark is our show starts at like 4 a.m. for him, and it's just a little bit early. He's an early waker, and he doesn't have. He told me it's no problem. We just moving in an hour ahead, and for him, he'll be on the show for what'll be around 5:30 a.m., which would be right about this time, as Rick mentioned too. So yeah, so definitely really, really excited about having Mark on. Mark, so I have a list, and we have lists and the whole thing that we have over in the office and all of that, of all of our potential guests and upcoming possible guests and all of that sort of stuff, as we're working and trying to figure out our scheduling and booking and trying to make sure. But I have what's basically what we call the dream list, the list of who do I really, really want to have on the show, who would be the best and most special people to have on the show that I really, really want. And Mark, it was at the top of the list. He's been at the top of the list since I first thought of the idea of doing this show. And to have him agree to be on the show and to be here with us live on the show is going to be something else. We'll see what happens as we promote the show ahead of time, and Mark lets everybody know on his channel and all of that he'll be on the show. We'll see how it goes. He's got a channel that's got almost 2.5 million subscribers. So hopefully we might get a nice lively conversation and a lively chat that day. And I hope Jay's going to be ready for it. I hope Jay doesn't go running away and screaming for the hills because of how crazy the chat could be if we get a good promotion on this show with Mark. So I'm really excited about this. It's going to be really great. So that's awesome. Let's see here. Yep. Connie says, yeah, I love Mark. Yes, too. And again, too, I've been following Mark and his channel since he was as big as our channel. Our channel is, I think we're heading towards 16,000 subscribers on our channel, and we're starting to see some decent growth and all of that sort of stuff at this point in time. And I remember back at the time when he had his channel, and I can't wait to talk to him about this too, because he was such an inspiration to me and what I've done with my YouTube and my sharing and my building the channel and everything. Is that back when he was like 16,000, 20,000 subscribers, he had to make a real big decision on whether or not he was going to continue his channel and he was going to continue moving forward with that or do other things. And so it was really great to see him. I mean, he was kind of gone even for a while, and it was great to see him come back, but not only come back, but come back in real full force, build really one of the great gardening and growing channels on YouTube worldwide. And I do believe that he was the first YouTube gardener to reach 1 million subscribers. Now, Epic Gardening is bigger, and Epic Gardening was right behind him, but I do believe that Mark was the first to 1 million, and now there's several others, and it's like I said, he's approaching 2.5 million, which is really great. Jersey Girl says, I'm excited for Mark. Yes, me too. Rick's self-sufficient me, yes. Awesome. And he says that he was in the Army. Yeah, he was too. I can't wait to talk to him about that as well too. So much I admire about Mark and everything that he does, and just the passion and fun he brings, and just that real Australian niceness, man, that he brings to everything that he does. And just, I'm really excited about this. Adam says, Jay is going to need some help in the chat if his subscribers join in. His live chats are insane. I know. I'm telling you, we'll have to see about something. Maybe we'll recruit you, Adam. Recruit some other of our faithfuls here to join in and help us make sure things are going good and all of that. When you get crowds of that size, you never know what can end up in our chat box, and we like to keep things really nice and fun and enjoyable for everybody who gets to join with us here on the Urban Gardener, because that's what we're here for, is building our growing community. And we don't need anybody trying to disrupt that community. So we'll see how it goes. That's the thing again too, and I talked about this before, is we've talked about growth on the show and growing our show and all of that, is that one of the things about having a big show, I would love to have a big show. I'd love to have a big audience. I'd love to have for tons of people to be here and contributing and getting to join in with the conversation and contributing questions and all that sort of stuff. But then there becomes a certain size where you start to wonder about how manageable is it really, Jay. Oh yeah, I'm sure it's going to be great when it comes down to it. He's got a big channel, and if he gives us a shout out on, say, his community page or something like that before on YouTube and all that, we might get a good chunk of people to show up, but it won't be as big as, say, if he went live on his own channel. You know what I mean? There is a big difference in numbers when it comes to that. So we'll see what we get. It'd be nice to have maybe 100 or 2, but getting into the thousands, like what would happen on one of his live streams from his own channel, that would be really insane. Let's see here. Serena asked a question here before we get going. I'll answer one last question. Do you have feral cats in your neighborhood? And if so, do you let them use your garden beds or use something to keep them out? And if so, what do you use? Yeah, right. Yes, we tackled this question. And this is something I do have some experience with. Growing in an alleyway, that is definitely something we have. Our alley cats In fact, I've had alley cats I've adopted over the years through here at the house. But in fact, George, our cat that we have, and you'll see him featured on some of our videos and our garden journal videos and that sort of thing. George pops up every now and then, and he's our alley cat pretty much. And I adopted him actually from our local, there's an organization that deals with ferals and strays and that sort of thing. And he was a kitten of a feral cat. So he was really skittish and really kind of, it's taken him a while, but he's really acclimated to living here and all of that sort of thing. But one of the things about having a good alley cat of your own is that they kind of help keep some of the other cats at bay, because living on an alleyway, I'll have cats no matter what. If the alley cat I shoo off and I can get it to move away, another one will come and replace it within no time. And so cats, are kind of persistent in finding spaces where they can get away with feeling comfortable and hot, hidden and secluded. And the alleyways are great places for them to kind of find those sanctuaries. And but it's also some competition between them in those spaces as well too. So having a good cat kind of helps keep the alley cats at bay. One of those other issues though too is every now and then though, George, like this last winter, befriended one of the alley cats that came through. They actually kind of I guess maybe this alley cat was persistent and ended up befriending my cat, and I ended up having to find other measures of shooing him off and getting him to move on. And it's basically, here's the thing, that utilizing things like one of my big things I've done is, and of course, is just kind of shooing for sure, just like, hey, you got to move on, you got to go. There's of course, water, that sort of stuff. I don't really like to try to scare a cat too much or anything like that. Other tactics, again, especially if they're using your garden space as a litter box, is using things like I have what I use a lot of the time are like chopsticks, wooden chopsticks, or if you can find some plastic chopsticks, and get a bunch of them and stick those in the ground, and you create so it's not comfortable where they're going to regularly, that sort of thing. Another thing too is using things like cinnamon or pepper powders, things like that as well too, which is an irritant, similar to like scaring them off. I try to use those sort of things as last resort things in order to move them out, because in the long run, when it comes down to it, I love cats and cats are my favorite. I'm a cat guy, but I can only have and take so many cats. George is enough. We have another cat too we talk about a lot, and you see him on our videos, and that's Dexter. He's our white cat, which I got from my daughter. She got him as a little kitten, and he actually moved into my neighbor's home. So he basically was my cat and then adopted my neighbor as his new owner, his person basically. And he lives over there most of the time, but he shows up every now and then. And again, he's another cat that kind of helps maintain his space and territory and all of that sort of thing. But when it comes down to it, you're just when it comes to your spaces with cats, it's just kind of creating making it uncomfortable for them, creating a situation where they just don't want to return. They want to return back to the same spot. So if you can kind of, like I said, with those spikes, some people use like forks, plastic forks, or even if you got a bunch of metal forks or whatever, use forks, those sort of things, and you stick them upside down so that they're sticking out of the ground and they just can't squat there in that space. And then they'll move on to another space, and hopefully that space is not a space that you're growing in, or they'll move on out of the alleyway into another space, as far as this other cat that I had to deal with too. So I was finally able to kind of get him out of these certain spaces. Every now and then, though, George too. George will start being doing the same thing in my garden spaces too, and I have to shoo him out, and I have to move him on to other spaces as well too. All right, everyone. Jersey Girl says I lost my 22-year-old cat last year. 22, man, that's a lot of good years with a cat, though. That's a lot. That's a really good life. But yeah, I've lost a few cats here. In fact, in our spaces in the alleyway, we have what I have is the little cat garden, basically. And it's a little bench. It's a little cat bench, and we've got a little kind of like a heart-shaped rock feature with catnip that grows out of some spaces there too. And I'll spread out some cat grass seeds every now and then when I can get some cat grass seeds, and we just grow that. It's kind of just a little cat themed garden, and the cats really like that little bench. They get up on there, the catnips grow around it, so they'll nap and lay around on the bench and everything too. So it's like their own little garden out there because I really love the cats. And again too, it's an alleyway, and in the long run, I'm gonna have cats whether I like it or not. Let's see here. Let's see. Rick mentioned too the water bottles on the lawn too. Yeah, I used to see these before, and I remember this even from when I was a kid and all of this. And as far as I've heard, it doesn't really work. So I guess yeah, maybe a myth. And we're going to be having Vikram on there too. And I want to mention that I want to see what he thinks about this one too. But water bottles for cats, it's supposed to scare them off or something like that as well too. But someone explained that to me years and years ago before I was even a gardener about that. It's just people trying to keep cats out of their yard. And so I've as far as I've read though, I've read that it doesn't really work either too. So all right, everybody. So awesome to just get to hang out with everybody. I guess we'll just have to again have our conversation with Joe Lampel at a later date here. I'll find an opening here coming up in a few weeks, and we'll get that out so everybody can see that too. And again, too, really sorry for those of you who wanted to see Joe. I mean, Joe's a great guy, and I love his show. And if you haven't met Joe or know who Joe Lampel is, I encourage you go out there and check out his show, Growing a Greener World. You can find Growing a Greener World even right here on YouTube. It is a PBS show, but they do have all their episodes on YouTube as well. I think there's a link. I think it's the YouTube link that we actually have that's in the description. So definitely go down and check that out. Watch some of those shows, and then you'll get to really enjoy our conversation that we'll have with him in a few weeks when we come back to doing that too. So I really encourage everybody to do that. If you are here with us live right now, go check out that link. Go check out Joe's Growing a Greener World show, and then come back when we have him back on the show, and we get to do that. Let's see here. Oh, Bowtie jumping in right at the very end, but you did make it right to the very last second there. But great to see you, Bowtie Life in the garden. We did have we were supposed to have Joe with us today, but ended up with some sort of issue. So we have a pre-recorded interview. We'll just play at a later date. So oh yeah, and Bowtie was saying, "Oh no, Gardner Joe, I love his series." Awesome. So you do know the series and all of that. But yeah, it's great conversation. We had issues with playing it here through the program I have today. It's probably going to require a restart and all of that. So we just hung out, just had a little bit of talk about what's going on, and a little bit of this and that, and getting to hang out with all of you here for our show for today. We did get to meet up with Marcela and Shannon from Seedy and Shady as AF podcast. They were really awesome and reached out to me recently, and I did their podcast. So I'll be on their podcast this Tuesday. So they were on at the beginning of the show. If you want to go back and check out the beginning of the show and meet up and get to see Marcela and Shannon from Seedy and Shady podcast, and check out that one as well too. A link below for my appearance on Tuesday, so you get to hear them interview me. So that's really great. And I also want to remind everybody, as we're closing out the show, to check us out tomorrow for the Sunday edition of the show. And remember that the Sunday of the edition of the show is going to be 30 minutes late. Maybe we're going to have it 30 minutes late this week. We'll be joining starting the show at 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow. And I will join in at 11 in the chat, but we'll get the show started at 11:30 so that we can make sure we got the timing right to have our great guest for the book club, have Tony join with us. Tony O'Neill just got his book out, Simplify Vegetable Gardening. And I'll also be joined with our good friend, Mark Boucher Colbert. He'll be joining with me to help be a co-host and co-interview Tony and talk about his book, Simplify Vegetable Gardening, as Mark is my partner in crime for our monthly gardening book club. And then too, you'll want to join in with that show tomorrow as well, because at the end of that show, we'll be announcing next month's gardening book club selection, and I'm really excited about this one too. I really love this book. People have heard me talk about it before. That's the only hint I'll give, but we've talked about it before. In fact, one more hint. They've been on the show before as well too, just like Tony. So I'm really excited about announcing that on the show at the end of the show tomorrow. So be sure to join in with us for that, as well as next Saturday's show. We've got joining with us live Vikram Baliga, the plant prof, the plant professor. Vikram is a professor at a university garden and teaches gardening, but what Vikram does so well is busting gardening myths, and he does these great reels where he plays all of these other really kind of interesting reels. And I know you've seen these reels before too, where people are talking about like bananas and using weird things, and if it looks weird or looks really crazy, sometimes and more than likely it's going to be a pretty crazy gardening myth or misconception or these sort of things that are out there. And Vikram does a really awesome job with his reels. I love watching his reels because he really breaks them down, and even those ones that look kind of weird and look kind of interesting that you don't know whether or not it's going to work or not, but it does. So even those ones, he's really honest and about those ones as well, and lets you know, yeah, it looks kind of silly, but yeah, that would work. And he does a really great job with those reels. I really enjoy those, and it's going to be great to be able to have a fun conversation with him and talk bunch about gardening myths. So that's a great idea for all of you who are joining with us, or even joining with us on the replay, or those who are here with us live. Maybe you can come back to the replay video and jump into the comment section as we're promoting everybody to comment on our videos and let us know of one of your favorite gardening myths, or one of those things that are just really big gardening misconceptions and misinformation that gets out there. Let me know some of those in our comment section so I can be sure to ask Vikram about all of those as well too. We're going to be following next week. Joining with us is Alexis from the Urban Gardener. We are the Urban Gardener here on YouTube and our channel, but over on Instagram, Alexis is the Urban Gardener, and she's going to be joining with us for our Are You Following Me segment next week. And really great Instagram. She's always putting out such great content, and I'm excited about getting to meet with her as well too. So you won't want to miss out on next Saturday's show as well too. And on our Sunday edition next week as well, we're going to be featuring another gardening roundtable discussion. We're going to have with us Tom Spellman from I can't get the name, Dave Wilson Nurseries. He's going to be joining with us with Charles Malky, who is the founder of Ivy Organics, our sponsor, Ivy Organics, and they do a lot of great trees, urban trees and urban orchards. And we're just going to dig into talking about trees, tree maintenance, tree care. We're going to talk all sorts of things about that, container trees and these sort of things that we have in our gardens and all of that too. So really looking forward to that gardening roundtable next Sunday as well too. So we got lots of great things going on here on the channel. So I hope all of you can join along with us as well too. So yeah, and real quick before we leave, I want to encourage everybody again to click that like button and hit the thumbs up for us before we go here, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share with your friends, and like I said, comment, jump into the comments section if you can too. And as well, I like to mention that we do have our Facebook group, the Let's Get Growing group on Facebook. This is a great place for all of you to share all of your gardening and garden pictures, videos, questions, anything. You got suggestions, you got any sort of thing like that, and you want to share with our gardening community here, Let's Get Growing, come join with us on our Facebook group. There's a link down below in the description to that group there, and I would love to see you there. I'd love to see what you've got growing on in your gardens. And again, it's just a really great way to share. And be sure to follow all of our other links in the description to all of our other guests and Instagram and channel and all of that sort of stuff too as well. We love your support and really, really, truly appreciate it. And again, I want to thank all of you so much for joining with us here today. It's been such a really great show, even though we did get to see our guest. But again, really great to be able to hang out and talk with all of you. So again, thanks for joining with us today. And I'll see all of you tomorrow. Remember, 11:30 a.m. instead of 11, but I'll be there in the chat if you want to show up at 11 too. Anyways, but I'll see all of you tomorrow for our Sunday edition, and maybe next week, next Saturday. All right. I'll see you then.